Hey everyone, we're back. Today we're talking about the dark side of the criminal justice system, and specifically what we're covering in this video is how prosecutors abuse their power, right? And this is very common. This is not something that happens every once in a great while. This is something that's all too common, and we're just going to cover just a few points, right? This is one of those things that you could really go on and on and on for a very long time. I'm gonna give you guys some examples, some real life examples. It's unfortunate, it's sad, right? These are people that I know that are going through this, right? That are victims of overzealous prosecutors, corrupt, unethical prosecutors with no integrity that decided that they were going to, go above and beyond, right? So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and talk about that here for a bit. So let's start off with this right here. So prosecutors have so much discretion about who they prosecute and who they don't prosecute, right? And that's important. That's important. And I think they have a little too much discretion. And I think that there's got to be some sort of mechanism in place to hold them accountable whenever they abuse that power. So that's one of the recurring themes that, right, if you listen to my content, is that there isn't enough accountability, right? For judges, for prosecutors, for police officers that decide that they're going to be corrupt, right? That they're going to apply their own version of, law and order, right? Because at every stage there's discretion, and we rely on these people, right, that we either elect, right, to these positions, or that get hired to these positions, right, that get promoted to these positions. We rely on them to have integrity, right, to be good quality people, especially when we're talking about the criminal justice system, right? Because this also applies to all sorts of government type position and roles, right? Whether you're talking about politicians or what have you. But I think when it comes to prosecutors, right, so as far as their decision to prosecute certain cases, not others, I'll give you guys an example. So there's a gentleman, right, that recently came to me and he needed some help. And, I was going to connect him with an attorney, or try to first just kind of listen to him and figure out what he needed, right? But the situation was this. So his ex-girlfriend made some charges against some allegations against him, right? All unfounded. There was zero evidence. And he was put in jail the first time, right? He was put in jail. They pursued those charges against him, right? Even though there was no evidence. It was completely baseless allegations from this ex-girlfriend. And he ended up, doing some time in jail. Finally was able to put the money together. Family was able to put the money together to bail him out. Then she made, while he was awaiting trial, right, she made up some other charges. And, and it wasn't even charges. It was allegations that he had reached out to her, but it wasn't that at all. It was all kind of a misunderstanding when it came to social media and who got notifications. I believe it was his account, but she was the one that received the notifications. There was something to that effect. The point is this, though. They were quick to arrest him again, throw him in jail again, right? Because of these charges that were there, right? So he was, once again, he was punished, had to, again, reach out to family, have them, talk to the bail bonds company, pay some additional money so that he can get his freedom back. Eventually, here's something interesting about this. Eventually, the charges were all dismissed. Eventually, once they really, when they started digging deep and, eventually the charges were dismissed. But the prosecutor there could have done that from the beginning, right? The investigators, the detectives, whomever was involved, they could have done that from the beginning, and he wouldn't have had to have gone through everything he went through, right? He lost his job, his reputation was tarnished, face was plastered all over as though he was guilty of domestic violence, when in fact he had done nothing. It was all made up. Here's where it gets even more interesting, though. So while he was incarcerated, right, the first time, she decided, right, that crazy ex-girlfriend decided that she was going to, because she knew, they lived together, so she decided to find his pink slip for his vehicle, and she forged it. She put all her information as though she was the new owner, filled out all his information, right, as the seller, as the owner of the vehicle, signed on his behalf, right? And she didn't even take the time to try to hide, to try to be creative of how she was, to try to, what's the word I'm looking for? Make it seem like it wasn't her forging his signature, right? She was just a crazy ex-girlfriend, not very bright. Everything, all the handwriting, including the signature, if you look at it, you don't have to be an expert. You could tell it was all one person, right, that signed everything. So he went ahead, he needed a car, right? That was his only vehicle. He went to police, took, right, a document, an official printout from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and he says, hey, look, she stole my car, she committed fraud, I want my car back, she's trying to sell it, I need to be able to do something before she sells this car, right? However, they took his case, they took all the information, and then when there was a prosecutor that decided that there wasn't enough evidence to take it to trial. That was what the response. And I got involved and I researched this a little bit, and I got it directly from the prosecutor, right? We don't feel we have enough evidence to take this to trial, to prosecute her for fraud. You have an official printout from the DMV. You have her handwriting blatantly, right? Just she signed her personal information, filled out all his information, and signed, on his behalf. And you can tell it's all her handwriting, even as a layperson, right? I'm not an expert, and they didn't have enough evidence, but yet they had enough evidence to arrest him, charge him, turn his life upside down with just some allegations. She had nothing, right? So had she had anything, just so we're clear, had she actually had any bruises, any scratches, anything, right, to prove, to corroborate the domestic violence charges originally, he would have been convicted, no question about it. But there was no evidence. She was not a trustworthy person, right? The moment you talk to her, and I'm guessing, right, they were able to determine that she was not being truthful. And the reason I make this assumption, right, to be clear, the reason I make this assumption is because they typically don't dismiss those types of charges. They don't dismiss them. They typically will go ahead and prosecute the person that's responsible for domestic violence. So what I'm saying is, do you see what I'm saying there? There's a disparity there. No evidence, but you turn a dude's life upside down. Here you have clear evidence, and you don't have enough evidence to pursue it. Crazy, right? So that's what I'm talking about, right? There should be a mechanism in place to make it easy for him to be able to pursue something against the prosecutor, to get him in trouble, get her in trouble because it was a female prosecutor, or to be able to hold her civilly for making a decision that was so blatantly wrong. But prosecutors just have that kind of power, and they can do it with impunity, and holding them accountable is nearly impossible, right, for that type of situation. So that's one. Another one is where they undercharge and they overcharge people, and it's all, once again, it's there's so much discretion, and they're not always fair about how they go about this, and I think they need to be held accountable for this as well. So an example of that, right, and this is something I know personally, a case I know personally. There was a case let's start off with this. There was a case that I read about where a female teacher, right, high school teacher, had intercourse with a student, right, underage student, multiple times, right? And I think she started off with, I'm not sure exactly, what the charges were initially, but what I can tell you is by the end of it all, right, when it was all said and done, she ended up with a 0 to 5, which what that means is he could serve, it was a 3rd-degree felony, so she could end up serving anywhere from, no time to up to 5 years. That's it, maximum 5 years. That was the end result, right? And I believe, right, and I could be mistaken on this, and it's irrelevant, right, even if I'm mistaken, but I think she ended up doing about 1.5 years, and then she was released. But even if she said she did 2 years or 3 years, compare that to this. So this guy I knew personally, same situation. What he did was not right, so don't take it as though I'm condoning what he did, right? Similar situation. He had sex with an underage girl. She was 17. He, on the other hand, ended up getting charged. I think it was with his case I know a little more details about, because I was trying to help him out. This is a guy that I met while I was incarcerated. He ended up with something like five to life charges. You know what I mean? So what that means is each life charge he could serve up to 99 years for each one. And he had a private attorney who fought for him, who went to battle for him. And in the end, he ended up with three charges that were 5 to life. That was the best they were going to do for him, right? And if he took that to trial, they were going to convict him on all 5 of them. So this was the wonderful deal that the prosecutor decided they were going to offer him, right? They offered him these 5 to life, run consecutive, right? One after another. So tell me, how is that fair? Somehow, this female teacher, right, who did the exact same thing, pretty much, right? Substantively, pretty much the same thing, ends up with 0 to 5, ends up doing very little time. This guy here, I met him when he had already done about 4 years. He's still incarcerated, and he has 5 to life charges. He will probably end up doing, 15, 20 years. How is that fair? Do you see what I'm saying? And that was the prosecutors that made these decisions. By the way, same prosecution's office. So it wasn't like we're comparing apples to apples in that regard, right? And the charges were same thing, right? Like we're talking about an adult having sex in a position of trust, having sex with a 16 or 17-year-old consensually, but it's considered rape, right? Because they're underage. So anyways, crazy stuff, right? Crazy. Here's another one. Prosecutors have the discretion to be able to ignore evidence that's favorable to the defendant. They have not just be able to ignore evidence, but they have the discretion to be able to not pursue any investigation in that direction if there's the possibility, right? That if they pursue it, that they might find evidence that exonerates that defendant. They don't have to pursue it. Same thing with police officers, right? But right now we're talking about prosecutors, and it's insane. So I'll give you guys an example of one that, and this is the worst one of them all. Know the guy personally, great guy. I believe he's 100% innocent. He actually has been convicted of first-degree murder, and it's a gruesome murder that took place, and I'll talk about it generally, right? Gruesome and brutal murder that took place. And on the night of the murder, right? On the night of the murder, there was detectives, right? Had him as one of several suspects, may have been the prime suspect. So they approached them that same night. They talked to him. They called him to the police department. He came in voluntarily, went and met with them. They stripped them completely. They found nothing on him. There was no blood evidence. There was no scratches, nothing. Brutal murder, right? And they had no choice, right? They had to dismiss, they had to dismiss him as a suspect. He was calm, cool, collected, right? All the notes from the original detective that, that interviewed him, that strip searched him, that, all of that, right? And they had evidence, by the way, that whoever killed the person actually, like, there was a struggle, right? There was a tussle. There was a melee, right? And that person should have had scratches and blood all over him, and But this guy here, they interviewed him, they checked him out, nothing. So they let it go. 10 years passed approximately, right? And a new detective comes on board, and he wants to be a hero, right? And he decides he's going to ignore all the evidence, right? That's already been gathered from previous detectives and all that. And he's going to re-interview some of these people to try to put it together, right? It's been 10 years, some pressure, right? They need somebody. They need to blame somebody. Who killed this other person, right? So they decide that they're going to go ahead and they're going to pin it on this guy, because this guy's ex-girlfriend, again, right? Or actually ex-wife, I think, decides after they get divorced, she's pissed off at him. So she's going to say some things that make him look guilty, right? Even though like the evidence, right, at the time of the murder, right, it was real obvious, like he had nothing to do with it. The dude did not do it. So anyways, but going back to this, so because of some statements, right, from some crazy ex-wife, the detective decides they're going to pin the murder on him. So they send it up to the prosecution's office, and the prosecutor has a choice. He can choose to prosecute or not prosecute. And in this case, he decides to ignore, right? And that's what we're talking about. They have the ability to ignore evidence. And I say the ability, I'm not sure if that's even the right word, right? They have the discretion. I'm not even sure if that's the right word, but he chooses to, right? He chooses to ignore all of the work that had been done before, all of the investigation that had been done before that clearly showed that he was not guilty. He just ignores it all. And he decides to take some statements from some crazy ex-wife and decides to run with it. And he charges this guy, and because he was a minority, this was a black dude in Utah at the time, right? Things were crazy. At the time, they were significantly worse than what they are now. It was an easy conviction. It was an easy conviction, and I don't like playing, or what's the word I'm looking for, like to really mention race, right? Because I think the criminal justice system is unfair for everyone. But in this particular case, I think it definitely had a role. And it's not because of just this case, but it's because of stuff that we'll cover in other videos and other stories that I got to tell you guys. But it's disgusting how bad things were here just 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. The convictions and the way that they were able to get the convictions, the stuff that they were allowed to say in open court, disgusting. Like, you're just like, really? Like, how is that possible? You know what I mean? That in the 1980s or 1990s, they were allowed to vilify somebody and to emphasize, that somebody was black, and because of that, they're probably guilty, right? And use religion to try to, support that. I mean, it's crazy. We'll go into that some other time. So anyways, but this guy, so the prosecutor decides he's just going to ignore all the evidence that shows that this dude is not guilty, and he's going to go ahead and pursue the criminal charges that have been sent up to him, right? From the police department, from this new detective that's trying to make a name for himself. What happens? He gets convicted. The guy gets convicted, and now he's looking at a life sentence. And I mean a life sentence. Like this guy, I think it's a 15 to life or 5 to life, something like that. But because of how gruesome the murder is, the guy may never come out. You know what I mean? The guy may never ever see the light of day. Crazy, right? But this happens, and this dude's alive, and he's in prison right now, desperately trying to get out. Wants to go see his mom before she passes away. I've talked to his mom. It's a sad case. Sad case. If I had the resources, I think I could. And I started to help out with this, right? I was helping an attorney out with this case, and you know what I mean. Got to make a living, right? But I had to kind of step back a little bit and not put as much time and energy into it because, right? But if I had the resources, this is the kind of stuff that I think we should go after. Like this guy's life matters, right? I've talked to his mom, and it's sad. You know what I mean? It's sad. I don't know how much time she's got left, and I totally understand like his position, right? Where he wants to see his mom, he wants to be able to hug his mom one last time before she passes away, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting. I think, yeah. And I know how he feels, and I know. I mean, to me, that's deep, right? Right? Like it touches me in a special place because I didn't know that I was going to get my conviction overturned, right? And I had a life sentence, and it was a self-defense case. But I got convicted of first-degree murder, which means there was a possibility I would have never gotten out, and I would never get to hug my mom, right, as a free man and be able to spend some time with her. So I totally know exactly what he's going through, what he's feeling. I can only imagine what his mom is feeling, right? His mother's feeling. But it's crazy, right? This is why I create this content. And I think the solution to these types of situations, there's a lot of solutions, but one of those solutions is to start holding these prosecutors accountable. And when I say hold them accountable, you got to change the way that the system is set up so that they can be held accountable. And not in a theoretical way, right? Because there's all this, I talk about holding accountable police officers and judges and prosecutors accountable. And somebody could argue, well, there is a mechanism. Yeah, but it's like next to impossible to hold them accountable. You have to spend tens of thousands of dollars, or you have to spend hundreds of hours to try to do it. That's useless. That's pointless. That's just something that, you know what I mean? That's just a facade, right? A mirage, so that, a way for people within the system, right? The corrupt ones to be able to say, no, but we do have a way, right, to hold people accountable. But it's like, really, who's got that kind of money? Who's got those kind of resources? Who's got that kind of time? You got to make it accessible. If a prosecutor is being corrupt, if he's biased, if he's abusing his power, you got to make it to where they can be held accountable. There's just no way around it. I mean, it's just, and I think it's something that we should all care about, because you understand, like, prosecution's office is almost like the government's pit bull, right? And you know what I mean? That pit bull, it might not be biting you right now, right? It gets unleashed and it's biting somebody else and tearing somebody else apart. But you never know when he's gonna just turn around and it's gonna come after you, or it's gonna come after somebody you love or somebody you care about. I mean, just look at what's going on right now. You see examples of it, right? So anyways, I think it's not pie in the sky. I think there's real ways, right? If you start electing, right? Because in a prosecution's office, you have the head prosecutor, right? That's in charge of that county, right? And they're elected, right? So those people, you have to put some good, solid, quality people, and you got to force them to actually put mechanisms in place so that people can seek redress, right? They can seek justice against prosecutors that abuse their power. So anyways, this is just another episode of this series, right, of the dark side of the criminal justice system. I hope this was interesting. Hope this was useful to you. Hope that you take this and do something about it, right? Help me bring about some changes. Let's get some justice, right? Some real justice for all of us. See you guys in my next video. I'm not an attorney, and this is not legal advice.